we need to talk about historiography. I know it's weird, but bear with me. So of course, amidst the backdrop of PBS being defunded, which we should probably all step up and start contributing to, Politico magazine runs this on Ken Burns and his new documentary on the American Revolution, what Ken Burns won't say about the American Revolution. This is the quote that stopped me in my tracks reading this article. We wanted to rid ourselves of the fashions of historiography and make a film that simply shows what happened. If you know anything about history, or journalism for that matter, that's not how any of this works. Right? You are making an argument about what happened and what mattered, even when you don't realize you're doing it. Even if you're just making a list of dates and saying this is what happened, you're choosing what to put in that list, what to keep out, what is important, what mattered, right? All of that is an argument. At the Merriam-Webster breakdown of this, historiography, the writing of history based on critical examination of sources, the principles, theories, and history of historical writing, the product of historical writing, a body of historical literature. We often shorten this to like the history of the history, but it's all the things that went into making those earlier histories. It's the arguments historians have been having between ourselves about these things in the past for generations, right? So to say that we're going to have a documentary about the American Revolution without historiography is just woefully inaccurate. And as Steve Sarson points out, Burns knows this. He says, I saw Ken Burns talk about the project at the American Historical Association. He proudly highlighted two things in particular: the contributions of very able historians on the historiographical cutting edge, and the fact that it includes enslaved and other subordinated people and not just the wealthiest and most known founders. That's historiography. And I think this is what's really going on here. Maybe he's just pitching this series to people who aren't knowingly interested in historiography. It's people who think they're above those arguments. But he also says, as a public educator, he could easily explain in broad terms that it is historiography that makes us know that the revolution isn't just about Jefferson and Washington. And again, those are historiographical arguments. And I have a lot of criticism of Ken Burns and some of his other work, especially in the Civil War documentary, which he dives headfirst into Lost Cause BS and presents it as fact. So yeah, we have some issues, but there's no way that he approached the American Revolution documentary without considering historiography. It's just not true. But it is true that that's how he's trying to build the film in the age of Trump, and with people pulling funding from PBS and claiming that any history that involves non-white, non-wealthy people is somehow woke history or inaccurate in some way. But that's also a terrible argument to make to sell that film. We're in a moment where it would be very useful to have lots of Americans thinking critically about our founding, our Constitution, our democracy, how we participate in these things, what it means, where the founders succeeded and where they failed, and where we might bridge that gap, right? To think on the Civil War and Reconstruction period as a rewriting of that Constitution. How is it different today? Do we want to go back to an early 20th century version where those amendments were largely ignored, which our Supreme Court is attempting to take us to, right? These are big issues, but to pretend that this documentary that certainly has historiography in it and is influenced by all of these amazing historians is somehow just a recitation of these big events, big dates, right? And that there's no real argument at its core, that there's no historiography here, and that we're not even going to attempt to answer these big questions or get people thinking about them and talking about them. I think it's a failure to meet the moment, and it's really disappointing.